Imagine you are a fly on the wall in a grand, sun-baked palace in ancient Babylon. The year is 323 BCE, and the air is thick with a suffocating heat and the heavy smell of illness. You hover near the open windows of a royal bedchamber, where one of history's greatest conquerors, Alexander the Great, lies in a state of slow decay. This is not the image of the invincible hero you know, but the haunting, human end of a legend. The life of Alexander was a whirlwind of conquest that began the moment he inherited the throne of Macedon at a mere 20 years old, a young man who moved with the speed and certainty of a force of nature. He possessed a gaze that could command armies and a presence so magnetic that it seemed to carry a hint of the divine. With his striking, athletic physique, he was more than just a king. He was a walking symbol of boundless ambition and relentless motion. In a breathtakingly short span of time, he had crushed internal rebellions, crossed the Hellespont to invade Asia, and carved a path of victory from the shores of Greece to the heart of the vast Persian Empire. At legendary battles like the Granicus River, Issus, and Gorgamla, he led his men against overwhelming odds, his genius for strategy and his remarkable speed shattering one army after another with surgical precision. He marched his troops ever deeper into the unknown, enduring the unforgiving heights of the Hindu Kush and fighting his way into the Indian subcontinent. Along this epic journey, cities were founded and named in his honor, rulers bowed before his might, and it truly seemed as though the entire known world was on the verge of kneeling at his feet. His vitality appeared boundless. He fought alongside his soldiers, endured the same hardships, and seemed truly untouchable, as if he were part man and part god. Before he had even reached the age of 33, he had single-handedly reshaped the political map of the world. Yet the end began in an entirely unexpected and anticlimactic manner. Following a night of feasting and drinking in late May, a mysterious and sudden illness struck the man who had survived countless wounds and the rigors of endless campaigns. Alexander was seized by a high fever and excruciating pain in his abdomen, symptoms that brought the world's most powerful man to his knees. Accounts from that time describe how his once mighty legs could barely support him and how he had to be carried to his bed, from which he would never rise again. In the agonizing days that followed, his authority began to wane as a new, grim reality set in. The conqueror who had been planning a new campaign into Arabia was now a silent observer, as his generals huddled in hushed, anxious conversations, their eyes frequently darting toward the failing king. The powerful commander, whose roar once rallied entire armies, was now so weak he could only communicate with faint gestures and nods, a prisoner in his own body. His mind, though still sharp and full of will, was betrayed by a physical form that was slowly and irreversibly shutting down. The last time his men saw him, he was carried out on a litter, a slumped and silent figure, a stark and heartbreaking contrast to the mighty leader they had followed across continents. They filed past him in a somber, weeping procession, each soldier bidding a final, silent farewell to their conqueror and their living legend. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was suffocating and heavy with a sense of dread. The relentless Babylonian heat radiated from the thick mud-brick walls, trapping the stench of sickness and unwashed bodies within its confines. Attendants and physicians scurried about, applying every remedy they knew, from cooling baths to exotic herbal concoctions, yet nothing seemed to break the grip of the fever. Fearful of failing the king and facing his wrath, some doctors hesitated to try more aggressive and potentially risky treatments. The very air of the palace, once a place of power and life, became heavy with the smell of death and decay, a grim premonition of what was to come. For centuries since, modern scholars have debated the cause of his sudden and mysterious illness. Was it a poison, perhaps from a rival who used a slow-acting substance to carry out a final, clandestine assassination? Or was it an infectious disease like typhoid or malaria, common ailments in ancient lands that he may have contracted during his exhaustive campaigns? A compelling, though unproven, theory suggests he may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that would explain why his mind remained lucid even as his body became paralyzed and his ability to move vanished. This theory could also explain the bizarre and a remarkable phenomenon that occurred after his death was announced. In the sweltering heat, his body showed no signs of decomposition for several days, a fact that convinced many of his divine nature and miraculous status. As Alexander's body failed, his final days became a grim tableau of intense political maneuvering and cold calculations. The silence of his sick room was often punctuated by hushed, tense arguments in the antechambers, not over his health, but over the fundamental question of who would control his vast, unprecedented empire. His most trusted general, Perdiccas, remained at his side, a silent vigil of loyalty and calculation, while other ambitious figures, like Ptolemy and Roxana, watched and waited, their eyes on the prize. The air was thick with suspense as everyone anticipated the conqueror's final command. On his deathbed, some historical accounts claim that Alexander passed his signet ring to Perdiccas, anointing him as his successor and a silent gesture of trust. Other accounts, perhaps more famously, claim that when his generals asked him who would inherit his empire, he whispered the chilling and prophetic words, "To the strongest," a final command that would ignite decades of brutal and bloody conflict among his successors. Whether he actually uttered those words or not, they became a chilling justification for the wars that followed, a final, catastrophic legacy that shattered his life's work. He finally died on June 10th or 11th, at just 32 years old, but the story of his life and death was far from over. After his death, Alexander's embalmed body became a powerful and sought-after political symbol. It lay in the heart of Babylon for 2 years as a massive, ornate funeral carriage was meticulously built to transport him to his final resting place back in Macedon. But before it could ever reach its destination, his general Ptolemy, who was governor of Egypt, orchestrated a daring ambush and hijacked the procession in Syria, seizing the body and taking it to his own domain. For Ptolemy, this was a masterful and strategically brilliant political move, for it granted him immense legitimacy as the guardian of the great conqueror's remains. He built a new capital at Alexandria and placed Alexander's body in a grand mausoleum, the Soma, where he was worshipped as a founding hero and a living god. The vast empire that Alexander had forged with his life's work fractured, his dream of a united realm dissolving into a series of rival kingdoms known as the Diadochi or successors. The corpse of the man who had created the world's largest empire now became a source of political authority, a powerful and macabre tool used by his successors to legitimize their rule. The tomb became a pilgrimage site for centuries, with Roman emperors like Augustus and Caligula making the pilgrimage to pay homage. But eventually, it too vanished from history, its final location remaining a mystery to this day. Ultimately, the man who seemed to defy all human limitations met the same inevitable fate as everyone else. His silent, helpless end, a powerful and final reminder that even the most celebrated conquerors are not immune to the inherent frailty of the human body.